E. Types of democratic systems. First, parliamentary democracy. The executive branch derives its legitimacy from and is accountable to the legislature, parliament. The head of government is often distinct from the head of state. Parliamentary democracy is a system where the executive branch derives its authority from the legislature, parliament, and is accountable to it. In this system, the head of government, such as prime minister, is typically a member of the parliament and is distinct from the head of state, like a monarch or president. The government is formed by the political party or coalition that holds the majority in the parliament, ensuring that the executive and the legislative branches are closely linked. This setup fosters a system where the executive policies are closely aligned. With the legislative majority allowing for potentially more efficient governance. However, it also requires a stable majority in the parliament to function effectively. And the head of government can be replaced if they lose the support of the majority. This form of democracy emphasized the importance of parliamentary debates and decision-making with a strong focus on party politics and collaboration. Second, presidential democracy. The president is thus the head of state and government. Elected separately from the legislature, presidential democracy. The president serves as both the head of state and the head of government, distinguishing it from parliamentary systems. The president is elected directly by the people, separate from the legislative branch. This system creates a clear division between the executive and the legislative branches of government, with each being independently accountable to the electorate. The president typically has significant power, such as vetoing legislation, executing laws, and conducting foreign policy. But these are balanced by check and balances from the legislative and the judicial branches. The separation of powers in this system is designed to prevent any single branch from gaining excessive control. A key feature of presidential democracies is the potential for strong and clear leadership. But it also carries the risk of gridlock if the president and the legislature are in conflict. Third, semi-presidential democracy combines elements of presidential and parliamentary systems. In a semi-presidential democracy, the government combines elements of the both presidential and parliamentary systems. This form of governance features a president elected by the public who serves as the head of state and the prime minister, who is usually appointed from the majority party in the legislature. And acts as the head of government. The president generally has significant powers, which can include foreign policy and national defense. But these are often balanced by the powers vested in the prime minister. Who typically handles domestic policies and day-to-day government operations. The distinct feature of this system is the dual executive law model. The president and the prime minister share executive powers, and their relationship is crucial for smooth governance. The prime minister and the cabinet are usually responsible to the legislature. Requiring parliamentary confidence to govern, similar to a parliamentary system. This structure aims to blend the stability and clear leadership of a presidential system with the representative and accountable nature of parliamentary system. However, the division of executive power can sometimes lead to complications, especially if the president and the prime minister come from opposing political parties. A situation known as cohabitation. False. Challenges and critics. Modern democracies face various challenges, including political polarization, corruption, influence of money in politics, underrepresentation of certain groups, and maintaining a balance between majority rule and minority rights. Critics of democracy often focus on these challenges, questioning the efficiency, fairness, and stability of democratic systems. Modern democracies, while effective in many ways, face significant challenges and critics. Political polarization can hinder consensus building and legislative progress. Leading to gridlock and inefficiency. Corruption remains a pervasive issue, undermining trust in public institutions and the fairness of the political process. The influence of money in politics through lobbying and campaign financing raises concern about the extent to which financial power can sway policy and elections. Possibly overshadowing the voice of the average voter. Additionally, the underrepresentation of certain groups in political process and institutions is a critical issue as it challenges the ideal of equality and inclusivity that democracies strive for. Balancing majority rule with minority right is another delicate aspect. While democracies are based on the principles of majority decision making, they also need to protect the interest and the right of minority groups. To ensure a fair and just society. These challenges lead to critiques about the efficiency, fairness, and the stability of democratic systems. With some arguing that they may not always produce optimal outcomes or adequately represent all segments of society. However, democracies are inherently adaptable and continuous. Efforts are made to address these issues and strengthen democratic governance. F. Global context. Today, democracy is practiced in various forms around the world. With each country having its own unique system and set of challenges. The global spread of democracy has been a major development of 20th and 21st centuries. Though it faces significant challenges in many regions, the global landscape of democracy is diverse and complex, with various forms of democratic governance practiced across different regions. The 20th and 21st centuries have been significant shifts toward democratic systems. Marking a major development in global political dynamics. However, the practice of democracy around the world is not uniform. And faces distinct challenges in different contexts. Variation in democratic systems. Diverse models. There are multiple models of democracy, including parliamentary, presidential, and semi-presidential systems. Each with its own nuance and operational methods. These systems are shaped by historical, cultural, social, and economic factors specific to each country. Hybrid systems. Some countries enjoy hybrid systems that combine elements of democratic governance with other forms, leading to unique political structures. Challenges in different regions. Emerging democracies in many regions, particularly in countries transitioning from authoritarian regimes, establishing stable democratic institutions remain a challenge. Issues such as weak rule of law, corruption, and limited political pluralism can hinder democratic consolidation. Established democracies, even in long-standing democracies, challenges such as political polarization, erosion of public trust in institutions, and the influence of money in politics. pose significant threats to democratic norms and effectiveness. Global spread and retreat. Democratic expansions, the latter half of 20th century, particularly after the end of Cold War, saw a significant increase in the number of democracies worldwide. This third wave of democratization expanded democratic governance to regions previously under authoritarian rule. Democratic recessions. Recent years have witnessed concern about a democratic recession or backsliding in some countries where democratic norms and institutions have been eroded or undermined. International influence and cooperation. Globalization and democracy. Globalization has both positive and negative impacts on democracies. While it facilitates the spread of democratic ideas and practices, it also presents challenges such as economic inequality and transnational issues. That complicate national governance. International organizations, bodies like the United Nations, European Union, and others play a role in promoting democratic values and practices. Offering support and setting standards for democratic governance. Adaptability and resilience. Responding to challenges, democracies are continually evolving. With efforts to reform and adapt to new challenges. This includes addressing issues like climate change, digital information, and the global health crisis. Which requires cooperative and innovative governance approaches. In summary, while the spread of democracy has been a defining feature of recent global history, its practice varies widely across the world, influenced by regional histories. Cultures, and socio-economic contexts. Democracies today face a range of challenges, both internal and external. But their inherent adaptability offers pathways for addressing these issues and evolving to meet the needs of changing times and populations. In summary, democracy is more than just a system of government. It is a continually evolving process that seeks to embody the values of freedom, equality, and justice.
All individuals. The rise of extremist parties in politics, populism, protests, the poor economic performance of some democracies, and the messiness of democratic politics stands in stark contrast to the seeming tidiness of societies and better economic performance of some non-democracies. That is the democratically elected Parliament of Taiwan and their legislators getting very excited about a recent budget bill debate. 나는 북극곰입니다. 나는 기후변화가 This and other recent global events have made frustrated citizens of democracies ask the question, is democracy failing to deliver the goods? Is democracy in crisis? Is democracy at a tipping point? I remembered very, very clearly as a young kid growing up in Manila, Philippines, when the military and the soldiers with their tanks rolled in my neighborhood streets to set up a checkpoint as President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and established his dictatorship. I remembered very, very clearly when my father, together with the neighborhood men, were all called down to line up on the streets, being vetted and patted down by armed soldiers. As a little kid, the fear of being so helpless in that kind of situation is simply unbearable. Yes, democratic politics is messy. Our demands are so many and we're very noisy. Our economic performance is not particularly great, but democracy is still the best system of large-scale governance anywhere. Surveys have shown us globally that citizens of democracy support their democracy. Even in Taiwan, this young democracy of Taiwan, where we just saw that very interesting clip, journalists love to report that stuff. It leaves Taiwanese kind of shaking their head, and even some nostalgic about the authoritarian era. But surveys upon surveys conducted by my colleagues at Taiwan's Election Study Center shows that Taiwanese citizens are very supportive of their democracy. Global survey conducted by the Pew Research Center in 2017 also shows that majority of democratic citizens support democracy. Countries like the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, France, Australia, majority of their citizens support democracy. Even in our own neighborhood of the Asia Pacific, the young democracies of Indonesia, South Korea, and the Philippines, majority of their citizens also support democracy. Indeed, this support for democracy is justified because the democracy delivers the goods. When we compare democracies and non-democracies, on average, democracies are wealthier. They have higher level of human development. Democracies are less corrupt. Citizens of democracies are happier and healthier. And citizens of democracies enjoy more human rights. So, why then all the complaints and grumblings about the failings of democracy? The pessimism about democracy? In part, it is because of the perception of the gridlock and stalemate in democratic politics, the unresponsiveness of public policy, politicians that seem to be detached from everyday lives and do not listen to the common people, which leads to political alienation. And in some way, the response is the rise of populism and extremism, which leads to further pessimism and the fear that democracy may be degrading. Yes, the rise of populism and extremism may degrade democracy. It may even threaten democracy. But if we look at it from another angle, another perspective, it actually shows that democracy is quite resilient. The resilience of democracy is evidenced by the voices of the silent, rational majority during elections and voting time. Yes, these populist parties and extremist parties may have gained some ground in some democracies, but overall, these type of political parties find it difficult to form government on their own. And if they are part of a coalition, often find themselves needing to compromise to come up with acceptable policy, constrained by their other coalition partners, and even pay the price in a succeeding election. Non-democracies often witness large swings and volatilities in their policies, like a pendulum, unhindered, unencumbered, unconstrained. Checks and balances and accountability are simply absent in non-democracies. Democracies provide credible constraints and credible commitments in order to limit these wild swings in policies. History is full of examples when non-democracies get their public policies so wrong with disastrous results. China's Cultural Revolution, where more than 500,000 people died, more than 1 million people persecuted and sent to labor camps, shows to us the weakness and critical flaws of a government of the one or of the few that is unresponsive, unaccountable, and unconstrained. In contrast, the simple use of majority voting that we use in democracies for decision making allows us to be correct more often than we are wrong. Elections and voting are a way democracies make decisions. In like an economic market, wherein the democratic political market offers us many options, many choices, all on the table for all of us to choose from. The richness of the variety of options for us shows how dynamic our democracies are. And in the process of selecting, the silent majority wins. And oftentimes it is the median voter that wins. And this position is more tolerant and more moderate. Of course, this is not to say that the median voter or the voter cannot be influenced. As society change, values change. Voter preferences will change. But radical changes in the median voter position hinges on two things: the vote and the voter. Now, what do I mean by this? Simply put, if all of us vote, then society's middle position will win out. And that often is the median voter position, more moderate and more tolerant. However, if only some of us vote, most of us do not vote, then the voices of the few will drown out the voices of the many. The median position of a small turnout election is very different from the median position of a large turnout election. So when a surprise election result do pop up, oftentimes one of the reason is low turnout. So why do we blame democracy when we should actually be blaming ourselves for not going to vote during election day? Now, what about institutions and structure of government? We constitutionally engineer and create these institutions to come as close to the values we hold dear and associate with democracy. But what are these values? Responsiveness, representation, accountability, equality, checks and balance. These are just some of the values we associate with democracy. Throughout the centuries, we have created different types of institutions to maximize these values we associate with democracy. Just look at the world's democracy and the variation in institutions and structure of government: parliamentary, presidential, multi-party, two-party. Democracy is a continuous experiment. Even the basic institution of elections and voting allows us to achieve responsiveness, representation, and accountability. But all of us have to vote. If not, the voices of the minority will drown out the voices of the majority. And as Sean Penn's character in the movie All the King's Men said, if you don't vote, you don't matter. Institutions matter. It constrains us. It gives us choices and options, and therefore determines outcomes. We create these institutions to achieve democracy. We adopt these institutions as close to the values of democracy that we hold dear. Just look at the democracy around the world, the variation and the richness of it. No one type of institution will do that job, though. But having said that, we know that there are some institutions that will help us achieve accountability, responsiveness, and representativeness better than others. We know there's a clear difference between parliamentary and presidential systems, between two-party and multi-party systems, between proportional systems and majoritarian systems, between prime ministers and presidents. Research in political science have shown to us that multi-party proportional parliamentary systems do a good job at achieving accountability, representation, and responsiveness. The choice of these institutions reflect our values. But remember, societal values change and evolve through time and history. Institutions then need to be adjusted and tweaked in order for contemporary societal values to be reflected on them, and that these institutions are fit for purpose. The problem is when we hold on to these institutions, some institutions, like old tools that are increasingly obsolete, and believing that they are still the only effective tool to solve modern problems. Like I said, democracy is indeed a continuing experiment. We never really arrive at democracy. For democracy is not a destination, but democracy is the journey we take together as a people, as a nation, as a country. This image serves to remind us that non-democracies, that is unrepresentative, unaccountable, unconstrained government of the few or of the one, is far more disastrous than a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Yes, democracy ain't perfect, but we should never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I agree, democracy may have its problems, but believe me, the alternatives are worse. Thank you.